This is a brief version of the on-screen disclaimer. This channel shares my personal memories and perspectives as accurately as I can recall them, supported by my own records where possible. Names and identifying details have been changed for privacy and safety. This content is for educational and healing purposes only. Some material may be difficult. Please take care of yourself and seek support if needed. The final exit, when control masquerades as circumstance. Copyright 2025, Happily Ever After Abuse.com. All rights reserved. Written and narrated by Brené Brown for Happily Ever After Abuse. Before we step into this story, take a slow breath with me. In through the nose and out through the mouth. Let breath remind you that even in reflection, your body belongs to you. There's a peculiar quiet that precedes a breaking point, a silence that feels staged, rehearsed, waiting for its cue. When control masquerades as circumstance, the stage lights don't dim, they flicker. The abuser begins to rearrange the set, moving props and rewriting lines until you begin to question which version of reality is true. That was the scene in my home the winter Dolus left. I didn't yet know that the final exit had already been written. It would take months before I could name the performance for what it was, a story crafted not to reveal truth, but to conceal accountability. Psychologists describe this behavior as impression management, the deliberate shaping of perception to maintain control and avoid consequence. For many survivors, this is where emotional abuse begins to take on the texture of theater. And that quiet season, I was unknowingly living in the final act. Part 1, The Departure. By that winter, his professional life had become another stage for control and performance. The story he presented to his colleagues, friends, and family was polished and sympathetic. A man burdened by circumstance, misunderstood by his employer, deserving of a dignified exit. Dr. Ramani Durvasula writes that narcissistic individuals often curate public narratives to preserve their self image, positioning themselves as the aggrieved rather than the accountable. At home, I watched the performance unfold. His job was, by his account, in jeopardy. The extensive writing component of his role demanded clarity and technical skill, both of which had been quietly supplied by me in each of his jobs for the duration of our marriage. I had written his reports, edited his correspondence, and shaped the tone of his publications. I had been the shadow statistician, completing his rigorous graduate school assignments, and crafted eloquent farewell emails to colleagues when he left jobs. All unseen, uncredited. All while meeting the demands of my own demanding technical work. When I finally stopped, the illusion began to crack. Rather than admit struggle or accept responsibility, he crafted a new plot. He would leave before being dismissed. He told his employer that a sick relative required his care. There was no such illness. He told family and friends the company had become chaotic. He told himself it was destiny. Within weeks, he had secured another position 700 miles away, close enough to his parents to feel adored, far enough from me to rewrite history. In domestic abuse dynamics, relocation is often used as a control tactic, separating the survivor from their support system or framing the abuser's departure as necessity rather than abandonment. To outsiders, it looked like a career move. To me, it was the opening act of an exit designed to inflict both confusion and credibility loss. He rehearsed the story until even I began to question my version of events. That's the power of manipulation. It erodes not only trust in others, but trust in your own memory. As Dr. Judith Herman notes, psychological abuse dismantles the survival's sense of reality through repeated invalidation, leaving them dependent on the abuser's interpretation of truth. In retrospect, I see that his new employment wasn't just a job, it was a stage built for a grand finale. He was preparing to vanish, not as a husband leaving a family, but as a hero escaping injustice. And in the script he wrote, I was never meant to have a speaking role. Part 2: Unrelenting Reminders. Freedom rarely arrives all at once. Often it announces itself in fragments through the objects we're forced to step around, the sounds that make our stomachs tighten. In the weeks before his departure, my home became a maze of half filled boxes and open drawers. Every wall whispered that change was coming, yet every morning he was still there. He moved through the house like an archivist, collecting the story he intended to tell: car titles, financial documents, receipts from a life he had curated to appear orderly. To anyone else, it would have looked like organization. To me, it was the choreography of control, a daily, silent reminder that I had none. Experts call this anticipatory coercion, the period before a separation when an abuser creates psychological tension through visible but unexplained preparations. It conditions the survivor to associate relief with the abuser's absence while simultaneously instilling fear the absence will never come. Every item he touched became a message: his car keys, carefully hidden between errands, suitcases leaning against the wall, packed but never moved. The slow ritual of claiming, sealing, and locking things away. I would hear the click of his trunk, the rattle of a latch, the slow exhale of relief that always followed, as if each document placed inside was a victory in an invisible war. He was stockpiling power, one belonging at a time. In the language of coercive control, these acts can fall under economic and psychological abuse, restricting access to shared property, assets, and records to assert dominance or preempt legal separation. Meanwhile, my children and I lived in suspended animation. We cooked dinner around his boxes, folded laundry over his luggage, slept beside the echo of packing tape. Every evening felt like a countdown to an ending that refused to arrive. Bailey, our black and white lab mix, felt it too. The American Veterinary Medical Association has long documented how animals in abusive homes often mirror their owner's anxiety, trembling, retreating, anticipating tension before it erupts. When Bailey flattened her ears and tucked her tail, I knew he was near. He believed his movements were invisible, that the slow dismantling of our home went unnoticed. But for survivors, awareness is instinct. We notice the silence between words, the pause before footsteps, the smell of exhaust from a warming engine. We learn to survive by reading the air. And in the air, I sensed both ending and danger. Part 3. The Safety Plan. When freedom cannot yet be reached, it must be planned. According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, an individualized safety plan, including preparations for secure housing, documents, and coded communication, is one of the most effective tools for reducing risk during separation. By the time his new job required relocation, I had already begun to weave a plan as carefully as he wove his performance. To him, it was a new beginning. To me, it was an exit strategy written in silence. I assured him I would follow, that I would sell our house, uproot our children, and reunite in the summer. Every word of that promise was a calculated safeguard. He believed I was still compliant, still afraid. That illusion kept us safe. In some states, a resident may lawfully deny reentry to an estranged spouse once notice and consent have been withdrawn. By securing the locks and managing access, I was not defying him, I was exercising my legal right to safety. Dolus had long, elaborate showers, 30 minutes at least. He would lie on the tile floor, allowing the water to run endlessly, lost in his own thoughts. I waited for that moment, the rhythm of water on porcelain, before I made my move. I replaced his house key with a decoy, a perfect match in color, shape, and wear. He would never test it before leaving. He rarely needed to use it. It was the simplest act of self preservation I had ever taken, and perhaps the bravest. Trauma therapists often note that empowerment begins in the micro decisions, small intentional acts that restore agency to the survivor's nervous system. That key swap was my nervous system reclaiming control. I didn't sleep that night, but I felt something new. Not fear exactly, but awareness. Awareness that my freedom would not be granted, it would be taken quietly, with precision and purpose. In those early hours, I realized I had finally become the author of my own safety. And in doing so, I had written the first true line of my liberation story. Part 4. The Final Gaslighting. The morning of his departure arrived without ceremony. No slammed doors, no final argument. Just the faint hum of his car engine warming in the garage. He walked through the house as though inspecting the set one last time, touching walls, glancing at closed doors, committing each detail to memory. Then, at the threshold, he turned to me and declared that he had been waiting for me to beg him not to leave. He went on to support his statement by recounting that he did the same for me when I tried to leave. This kind of provocation is a classic tactic of gaslighting, an attempt to rewrite history and elicit an emotional confession that can later be used against the survivor. It is not conversation, it is manipulation. I remember the stillness between us, the long suspended silence in which 1,000 words could have lived, but didn't. Tears came, yes, but not from a desire for him to stay. They came from the exhaustion of endurance, from the closing of a chapter too long deferred. Dr. Judith Herman reminds us that grief is an essential companion to freedom. The body must mourn what the mind has already released. Without a word, he crossed the threshold. I stood behind him, feeling the cold air of February sweep inside the house. Then came the sound of the garage door lifting, followed by the brief vibration of his car as it backed out. The air smelled of exhaust and endings. In the surreal stillness left in his wake, I pressed the garage remote and felt the vibration through my palm as though I were physically sealing away the past. Its final lowering was like the closing curtain of a decades long play. Trauma specialists sometimes describe this as somatic completion, when the body recognizes safety before the mind dares to name it. He was gone, and the house, for the first time in memory, was quiet. Part 5: Aftermath and Emotional Reality. In the space he left behind, emotions collided: grief, disbelief, relief, guilt, and an ache so deep it had no name. My daughter, Isis, hid away in her room, cocooned in silence. My son, Suchus, watched from the kitchen island, expressionless. And Bailey, our silent empath, trembled on her pillow, tail tucked, ears back, waiting for chaos that no longer came. The Child Welfare Information Gateway reports that children in households of coercive control often manifest stress through withdrawal, hypervigilance, or caretaking behaviors. Healing for them begins when predictability returns, when fear no longer dictates their rhythm. I moved through the house slowly, as if learning its geography for the first time. Every corner was haunted by memory, yet every breath felt fractionally freer. I looked at the empty walls, the soft morning light spilling across the floor, and thought of the key I had switched, the lies I had told for our safety, the steady courage that had brought us here. In the aftermath of domestic separation, survivors often experience post separation abuse, stalking, financial interference, or manipulation through children. Documenting patterns, securing legal protection, and maintaining support systems are essential next steps in protecting one's stability and narrative. I didn't yet know how to live freely, but I knew I would learn. Dr. Richard Tedeschi and Dr. Lawrence Calhoun called this process post-traumatic growth, the reconstruction of meaning and identity following profound adversity. That night, I told my children we were safe. I wasn't entirely certain, but I said it anyway. Sometimes faith is the only bridge between survival and peace. Let us reflect. When I think of that day now, I see Not abandonment, but release. The illusion had collapsed under its own weight, and what remained was truth, unadorned, steady, liberating. As Dr. Brené Brown writes, owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. In owning my story, I found not only voice, but vocation. Each retelling is not a return to pain, it is a reclamation of meaning. It is the sound of my heart teaching itself how to speak kindly again. For every survivor listening, you are not fragile because you tremble. You tremble because you have survived something that demanded your silence, and you are still here to speak. Sincere thoughts from me to you. This narrative is not about endings, it is about instruction. It documents the unseen mechanics of coercion, how control often wears the mask of reason, how survival requires strategy as much as courage. If you are living in the shadow of manipulation, know that knowledge is light. Read, listen, plan quietly, and remember the moment you begin to believe your intuition over their explanation, you are already on your way out. Take one deep breath with me now. In through the nose and out through the mouth. And remember, freedom doesn't always arrive with celebration. Sometimes it arrives in silence through a door that finally closes.